In today's video, we're diving into some of the most chilling shark encounters ever. From a fierce tiger shark attack off the coast of Hawaii to a brutal tiger shark strike in South Africa. But first, in Mexico's Guadalupe Island, a great white breaches a cage and leaves a diver dead within minutes. It was October 15, 2016, in Guadalupe Island, Mexico. Far out in the Pacific, 150 miles southwest of Ensenada, the volcanic cliffs of Guadalupe Island rose abruptly from the sea. The island's barren slopes, streaked with shades of red and gray, were a stark contrast to the endless blue around them. Below the surface, the waters were famous, not just for their clarity, but for the great white sharks that gathered here every year. That morning, the ocean was calm, its surface smooth under a pale early sun. The water temperature hovered at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, with visibility stretching nearly 100 feet. For divers and thrill seekers, it was perfect. Several commercial dive boats floated at anchor in the island's sheltered northeastern bay, their decks buzzing with preparation as cages were lowered into the water. Among those aboard the Pacific Hunter was Marcus Chen, a 34-year-old marine biology professor from San Diego. His fascination with apex predators had shaped his career. Years of research papers, countless hours tagging and tracking sharks, but all from the surface. This trip was different. It was a chance to stand just feet away from the animal that had defined much of his professional life. Marcus had been saving for this expedition for 2 years. His wife, Sarah, wasn't thrilled about it, but he'd reassured her that Guadalupe's safety record was flawless. The cages were built to withstand the force of even the largest sharks, and no diver had ever been seriously injured here. The Pacific Hunter left port at 5:30 a.m., carrying 12 passengers and 6 crew members. As the boat closed in on the island, Marcus stood at the bow, watching the jagged cliffs grow taller. By 8:15 a.m., they were anchored in 120 feet of water. Crew members lowered 2 aluminum shark cages into place and began preparing chum, fish oil, blood, and scraps to draw the predators in. Within half an hour, the first dorsal fin sliced the surface. Great white sharks are among the ocean's most efficient hunters. Adults can exceed 20 feet in length and weigh more than 5,000 pounds. They can accelerate to 35 miles per hour in short bursts, propelled by powerful tail fins, and their bite force is measured at over 18,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone with ease. Guadalupe Island's dense seal population made it one of the most reliable places in the world to see them, and during peak season, several individuals could be spotted in a single day. Later that morning, Marcus stepped into the cage for his second dive of the day. The structure measured 8 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 7 feet tall, suspended off the stern of the boat. The bars were spaced at 12 inches, small enough to keep a shark's head out, or so the design intended. 3 other divers joined Marcus. They wore wetsuits, masks, and surface-supplied air hoses. From the port side, a massive shape emerged, an 18-foot female great white. Her size, scars, and notched dorsal fin identified her instantly to the crew. Deep Blue, one of the most well-known sharks in these waters. She circled once, slow and deliberate, then dropped out of sight beneath the cage. Seconds later, she came back, this time in a full-speed vertical strike. Her snout slammed into the lower corner of the cage with a hollow metallic crack. The impact bent one of the vertical bars outward, just enough to create an opening wider than intended. The jolt threw Marcus against the opposite wall. Deep Blue's head pressed into the gap. Her jaws opened wide, rows of serrated teeth flashing in the filtered sunlight. She lunged, biting Marcus across the left side of his torso. The pressure crushed multiple ribs instantly and punctured his lung, while her teeth tore deep into muscle. A cloud of blood blossomed in the water. The force dragged Marcus partly out of the cage. The other divers flattened themselves against the far wall, their view a blur of thrashing tail and white belly. Deep Blue shook her head violently, working to pull him free. Her jaws released briefly before clamping down again, this time on his upper arm. The bite fractured his humerus and shredded the shoulder joint. The movement spun Marcus sideways, his body now almost entirely outside the cage. With one final surge backward, the bent bar gave way enough for the shark to pull clear. She descended to about 30 feet, Marcus still in her jaws. Down there, she delivered a final bite to his head and neck. The crushing force severed his cervical vertebrae. His body went limp, slipping from her grip and drifting downward. On the surface, crew members had already called for emergency divers. 2 entered the water within moments, descending into a clouded mix of blood and disturbed silt. They reached Marcus in less than a minute, carefully lifting him back to the surface while keeping watch for the shark's return. He was pulled onto the dive platform, and he was pronounced dead on board. Mexican maritime authorities inspected the cage and determined that metal fatigue in the corner joint had weakened the frame. The blow from Deep Blue had been enough to bend the bar outward. New regulations were introduced soon after: reinforced corner construction, reduced bar spacing, and mandatory pre-dive inspections for all commercial operators. Marcus's family later set up a small marine conservation fund in his name, reflecting the passion that had drawn him to Guadalupe Island. His death became a sobering reminder that even with the best precautions, the ocean's apex predator could still find its way through. Marcus's death led many dive operators to quietly review their own safety protocols. Not long after, off the coast of Hawaii, another cage dive would push both gear and human endurance to the brink. It was May 28, 2014, off the north shore of Oahu, Hawaii. 10 minutes out from Aliwal Harbor, the tour boat idled beyond the reef line, where the deep blue Pacific rose and fell in long, even swells. Trade winds brushed the surface into a glassy chop, and the sun burned through scattered clouds, turning the water a clear cobalt. Below, the seafloor dropped quickly from pale sand to dark blue water, with bait schools flickering like mercury beneath the hull. The water temperature hovered near 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility extended more than 70 feet, ideal conditions for spotting approaching predators. To the west, a thin line of whitewater marked breaking surf over the outer reef. To the east, the green spine of the Ko'olau Range faded into haze. A chum slick feathered off the stern, drifting down current and out into deeper water. Rebecca Becky Lawson, 36, had flown in from Seattle to finish a month-long feature on adventure travel across the islands. A certified scuba diver and confident swimmer, she'd never been face-to-face with large predatory sharks. Shark cage diving, offered out of Aliwal, was slated as the final entry on her bucket list, one last adventure before flying home. Just after sunrise, the boat left the harbor and headed into open water. The crew gave a safety briefing, explaining cage entry, hand placement, and camera use. The cage, inspected and secured to the transom, floated on sturdy pontoons. Becky suited up, checked her gear, and joined 2 other guests for the first rotation. Tiger sharks are among Hawaii's most common large predatory sharks. Females can exceed 14 feet and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. Their broad heads, keen electroreception, and slow, confident approach make them consummate investigators. Unlike great whites, which often ambush from depth then disengage, tiger sharks are notorious for close passes, repeated bump checks, and opportunistic bites on floating objects. Becky entered on the second rotation. The cage settled with its top frame just above the surface. She gripped the interior rail with her left hand, braced her fins against the lower crossbar. Small jacks and mackerel swirled in the slick. 5 minutes in, a shadow rose from the blue, a large female tiger shark, approximately 13 to 14 feet, moving with slow, deliberate strokes. She circled once, passed the stern, and glided along the cage's port side at arm's length, pectoral fins steady, tail sweeping in measured arcs. The crew kept the bait line outside the cage footprint, drawing the shark away on a controlled path. On the third pass, she altered her line, turning broadside, then angled in. Her snout touched the cage corner in a probing bump, producing a dull thud that echoed through the frame. The upper corner bracket flexed slightly. A hose clamp on the corner mesh shifted under load. The shark struck again, harder this time, rattling the corner stanchion. A palm-wide gap opened where the mesh met the bar, and water surged through. Becky tightened her grip as the cage rolled in the swell. The tiger shark came head-on, biting across the exposed seam of the cage. Her teeth clamped onto Becky's right forearm, tearing through neoprene and into flesh. Skin and muscle split under the pressure of the serrations. Blood streamed into the water in thin red threads. The shark pulled, testing. Becky's arm lodged against the inner crossbar, preventing a clean draw. The jaw released and rebit slightly higher on the forearm, deeper. A short shake followed, a lateral whip, tearing lacerations into parallel tracks. The cage pivoted on its hinge as swell lifted the transom. One of the crew dropped a weighted push-pull and drove it against the shark's head. The contact redirected her angle, forcing a partial disengagement. The tiger shark backed off, swept a low circle, then came again along the port side. This time she angled upward at the mid-frame. Her head rode over the lower bar, and her mouth closed around the cage rail itself, testing metal with a brief crush. The frame held. She let go, veered, and passed down current. Blood traced a faint ribbon off the stern. Becky's forearm bled steadily. The wetsuit sleeve peeled back to reveal deep punctures and torn tissue. A deckhand clipped a retrieval line to the cage, and the skipper powered forward to push the shark away. The crew winched the cage up and pulled Becky onto the deck. The crew applied a pressure dressing and packed the deepest wounds with hemostatic gauze while monitoring her vitals en route to Aliwal. The shark appeared twice more behind the boat before vanishing into open water. At the harbor, EMS transferred Becky to Wahiawa General, then to a higher-level facility in Honolulu. Surgery cleaned and repaired the tendon damage, fixed a hairline radius fracture, and placed drains. She was discharged in a splint with a long course of antibiotics and months of hand therapy ahead. State boating officers documented the incident, noting the corner mesh had been secured with corroded hose clamps and inadequate backup. The operator replaced all corner mesh with welded stainless panels, added extra lashing, and updated safety briefings to keep arms well inside inner rails. North Shore operators stressed that tiger shark approaches are common, but injuries are rare with proper equipment and positioning. Becky left with lasting scars, a reminder that even controlled wildlife encounters carry real risk. In the shark-filled waters of Gansby, South Africa, another cage dive was about to turn dangerously real. It was March 18, 2013, off the rugged coast of Gansby, South Africa, a place often called the Great White Capital of the world. The waters here were a shimmering turquoise on the surface, but beneath lay a different world, colder, darker, and ruled by one of the ocean's most efficient predators. The charter boat. Southern wind floated just beyond the kelp line, anchored in calm swells. The horizon stretched endlessly, but closer in, the sea was restless, stirred by currents that carried the scent of fish and seal colonies from nearby Dyer Island. The air smelled faintly of chum, a mix of fish oils and tuna heads, drifting from the bait box tied off the stern to draw in the day's main attraction. 35-year-old Olivia Hayes had flown in from Melbourne for her first solo holiday in years. A marketing consultant by trade, she'd spent months buried under deadlines and late nights before finally taking her friend's advice to book something wild, something unforgettable. Shark cage diving hadn't been part of the original plan. She signed up only after meeting a group of backpackers in Cape Town who swore it was the ultimate adrenaline rush. Olivia wasn't afraid of the ocean. She'd grown up swimming in Port Phillip Bay, But the thought of being face to face with a great white was another matter. Still, with the forecast promising calm seas and clear visibility, she decided it was now or never. The morning began with coffee on deck, followed by a briefing from the dive master. He outlined the cage's safety features, the importance of keeping hands and cameras inside the bars, and the procedures if a shark came in close. The message was clear. The predators were drawn to the bait, not the divers. But caution was non-negotiable. Olivia suited up in a thick wetsuit, the neoprene snug against her skin. The cage was bolted to the side of the boat, half submerged in the water. From above, it looked solid. Steel bars spaced just enough for a clear view, but tight enough to keep a shark's head from fitting through. She was in the second rotation, watching from the deck as two other divers slipped under the surface. Moments later, a shadow passed beneath them. A female great white, perhaps 14 feet long, circling with the slow, deliberate grace of a seasoned hunter. Great white sharks are the largest predatory fish on Earth, capable of speeds over 25 miles per hour and bites strong enough to crush a seal in seconds. In cage diving encounters, they often approach out of curiosity, testing their surroundings with quick bursts of speed or investigative bumps. While direct attacks on cages are rare, the combination of bait, noise, and human presence can sometimes trigger more aggressive behavior. By the time it was Olivia's turn, the great white had been joined by a slightly smaller male. The crew lowered her and 3 other divers into the cage. The cold water pressed in instantly, muffling sound except for the hiss of air bubbles. She gripped the inside bar, scanning the blue-green haze for movement. The female came first, gliding out of the gloom. Her eyes were black, unblinking, her body flexing in perfect arcs. Olivia watched, transfixed, as the shark passed within inches, the scars along her flank visible through the water. Then, without warning, the bait line snapped taut. The shark lunged, jaws opening wide, and in the chaos, one of the upper corner joints of the cage gave way with a metallic groan. The impact bent a section of the frame outward just enough for her snout to push through. Olivia felt a sudden burst of water as the shark's head broke the plane between them, her teeth clamping onto Olivia's left shoulder. The force slammed her backward into the opposite side of the cage. Pain radiated down her arm, hot and sharp, but she didn't have time to react before the shark thrashed, twisting the bent bars further. The dive master above was already yelling for a rapid haul-up. 2 crew members cranked the winch, but the cage rocked violently as the shark pulled sideways. The other divers kicked toward the far corner, giving Olivia as much space as possible. The shark released her shoulder but struck again, this time clamping onto her forearm. The pressure crushed muscle and bone. She felt the snap even through the adrenaline. Blood clouded the water, drawing the smaller male into a rapid pass just outside the cage. One crewman swung the bait pole hard against the shark's snout, forcing her to recoil just long enough for the winch to lift the cage halfway out of the water. The shark slid back into the depths, the bent corner of the cage hanging like a broken rib. On deck, the crew pulled Olivia out first. Her wetsuit was shredded across the left arm and shoulder, deep lacerations exposing muscle. Her forearm hung limp, fractured in 2 places. She was conscious but silent, her breathing ragged. A pressure bandage went on immediately while the captain radioed for a medevac. The boat sped back toward shore, every wave slamming the hull as the crew worked to keep her stable. She was airlifted to a Cape Town hospital where surgeons spent hours repairing torn muscles and setting fractures. The bite force had severed several tendons, and nerve damage meant months of rehabilitation ahead. South African maritime authorities later inspected the cage and confirmed that a corroded weld had weakened the joint that bent during the strike. The incident led to new safety checks and reinforced corners on all licensed shark diving cages in the region. Olivia eventually regained partial use of her arm, though the thick, pale ridges running from shoulder to wrist remained, a permanent reminder of the day she faced one of the ocean's most powerful predators, and survived. That narrow escape in Gonsby was a victory in its own right. Across the Atlantic in Cape Cod, a surge in great white numbers was about to bring the danger frighteningly close to shore. It was September 7, 2010, in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The wide arc of Nauset Beach curved along the Atlantic coast, its golden sand stretching for miles under a pale, late summer sky. Onshore breezes carried the smell of salt and seaweed, and just beyond the surf, the waters shifted from turquoise shallows to a deep, shadowed blue. In recent years, these waters had become known not just for pristine beauty and rolling surf, but for something far more dangerous: the steady return of the great white shark. The barrier beaches of Cape Cod are a natural convergence zone for predator and prey. Offshore sandbars, deep troughs, and strong tidal currents create prime hunting grounds for the seals that haul out by the hundreds along Monomoy Island and Chatham Harbor. And where there are seals, great whites follow. That summer, multiple sightings had been recorded almost daily. Dorsal fins slicing through the surface, seal carcasses washing ashore, and warning flags flying along the lifeguard stands. 30-year-old Ryan Carter was a schoolteacher from Boston, taking one last trip to the Cape before the school year began. He'd been coming to Nauset Beach since childhood, learning to bodyboard in the gentle shore break before graduating to a longboard in his teens. Confident in the water, Ryan prided himself on being shark smart. He followed posted advisories, avoided swimming at dawn and dusk, and never strayed too far from shore. That Thursday morning was clear and warm, the first hints of autumn hidden behind summer's lingering heat. Ryan arrived just after 9 a.m., when the beach was still quiet. A few families were setting up umbrellas higher up the sand, and a pair of surfers paddled out beyond the break. The lifeguard tower stood tall, a red warning flag fluttering. Not an outright closure, but a reminder of recent shark activity. Ryan waxed his board, adjusted the Velcro on his leash, and waded into the knee-deep surf, the cool Atlantic washing over his feet. For the next hour, the session was idyllic, waist-high waves rolling in clean and steady. Ryan caught ride after ride, paddling back out each time with the rhythm of someone who had done this for decades. The water was slightly murky from an overnight swell, visibility dropping to less than 10 feet below the surface. The great white shark, capable of reaching lengths over 20 feet and weights exceeding 2 tons. In the North Atlantic, their presence along Cape Cod has surged in the last decade, drawn by booming seal populations and warming waters. They are ambush predators, often attacking from below with explosive speed, using their serrated teeth to incapacitate prey. While attacks on humans are rare, the similarity in size and silhouette between a seal and a prone surfer makes cases of mistaken identity a persistent danger. At 10:42 a.m., Ryan was sitting just outside the breaking waves, straddling his board with his legs dangling in the water. He turned his head toward shore, watching a family of 4 splash in the shallows, unaware that just beyond him, something massive was closing the distance. The shark struck from directly below. In a split second, the water erupted. Ryan and his board launched upward as a 13-foot great white's jaws clamped around his right thigh and board rail simultaneously. The initial bite severed his femoral artery, shredding muscle and splintering bone. Ryan was pulled under in a violent thrash, the shark's head shaking side to side. His board leash snapped, and a plume of blood swirled into the churning water. The predator released him momentarily, circling with slow, deliberate arcs before coming in again. The second strike targeted his midsection. Massive jaws enveloped Ryan from hip to rib cage, crushing his pelvis and breaking several ribs instantly. The bite force ruptured internal organs, and the sudden rush of water into his punctured lungs made it impossible to cry out. The shark rolled to one side, dragging Ryan deeper. At approximately 15 feet down, the final bite came, a crushing clamp on his upper torso and left shoulder. His collarbone snapped, his upper arm nearly severed. The predator then released, letting his body drift upward, motionless, toward the surface. From the beach, lifeguards had already launched into action. A whistle blast cut through the air as two rescue swimmers sprinted into the surf, paddling hard toward the crimson stain spreading offshore. A surfer nearby reached Ryan first, pulling his limp body onto his board and paddling toward the rescuers. Ryan was brought to shore within minutes, but the damage was catastrophic. CPR began immediately as lifeguards worked to control the massive blood loss. Paramedics arrived within 5 minutes, applying tourniquets and continuing resuscitation efforts. Despite their work, Ryan was pronounced dead at the scene. The injuries to his major arteries and internal organs were beyond saving. Nauset Beach was closed for the remainder of the day, with patrol boats sweeping the area to monitor for further shark activity. In the following days, Cape Cod residents and tourists voiced mixed reactions. Some called for expanded shark mitigation efforts, including sonar detection buoys and seasonal closures. Others argued that the ocean was the shark's domain and that human presence carried an inherent risk. Ryan's family released a short statement, urging the public to remain cautious and respectful of the marine environment. Cape Cod's encounter proved how close danger can come to shore. Off South Africa's Aliwal Shoal, a diver would learn that even far from land, the ocean can close in fast and leave scars that last. It was August 5, 2016, 20 miles south of Durban. The open coastline of KwaZulu-Natal gave way to rugged headlands and the warm surge of the Indian Ocean. Beneath the surface lay Aliwal Shoal, a submerged reef system famed among divers for its coral gardens, dense schools of fish, and the constant presence of apex predators. Rising abruptly from the seabed, the shoal's ridges and caves created a perfect hunting ground. That morning, a mild swell rolled in from the south. Suspended silt reduced underwater visibility to just 25 feet, while the current carried baitfish in glittering shoals across the reef, prime conditions for sharks to ambush prey. Michael O'Brien, a 39-year-old mining engineer from Perth, had been diving for over 2 decades. A skilled freediver and spearfisher, he'd competed internationally, earning a reputation for precision and calm under pressure. While much of his experience came from spearfishing alone, this trip to South Africa was for something different. A scuba exploration of Aliwal Shoal's deeper ridges, where tiger sharks, bull sharks, and dusky sharks were known to patrol. The day began before sunrise at Umkomaas Harbor. The dive boat's twin outboards pushed through the chop towards the marine protected area, the sun just breaking over the eastern horizon. On board, the crew went over the dive plan: 2 descents along the southern drop-off, a mid-water drift, and a return over the reef top. Visibility was marginal, but the baitfish activity meant there was a good chance of seeing larger marine life. By 7:30 a.m., Michael was geared up and rolled back into the water. Dusky sharks are among the largest members of the Requiem shark family, capable of reaching over 12 feet in length and weighing more than 750 pounds. Often mistaken for bull sharks at a distance, duskies are wide-ranging, opportunistic predators, feeding on fish, rays, and occasionally smaller sharks. While not typically aggressive toward divers, they are curious, and in murky water, their investigative bites can be catastrophic. Michael descended to 60 feet, the reef rising like a jagged spine beneath him. Soft corals waved in the current. A school of kingfish flashed past, followed by the distant shadow of something larger. The first 20 minutes passed uneventfully. The occasional reef shark cruised the edge of visibility, never closing the gap. Then, from his left, a dark shape materialized out of the haze. The profile was unmistakable, deep-bodied, with a rounded snout and powerful tail strokes. A large dusky shark, perhaps 10 feet long, was closing in at a steady pace. At first, Michael assumed it would pass, as most sharks did, but instead, it arced around behind him. The attack happened without warning. In a sudden burst of speed, the shark struck from below and to the side, jaws clamping onto Michael's left calf. The force spun him sideways, bubbles exploding from his regulator. Rows of serrated teeth punched through neoprene and deep into muscle, leaving parallel arcs of punctures. The shark released, circling tightly. Michael tried to kick upward, but the movement stirred the water, flashing his silver fin, possibly triggering the second strike. This time the shark came in from the front, jaws half open. It seized the lower half of his right fin along with a strip of his wetsuit, narrowly missing a second major bite to his leg. The impact jolted him backward, and instinctively Michael kicked free, losing the damaged fin. Blood drifted upward in red threads. The boat crew, seeing the disturbance from above, accelerated toward his position. A safety diver dropped in, intercepting Michael halfway up. The Dusky made one more slow pass before fading into the murk. Michael was pulled over the gunwale and laid out on the deck. His left leg bled heavily, muscle fibers visible through the torn skin. A pressure dressing slowed the flow while the skipper pushed the throttles toward Umkomaas. At the dock, paramedics stabilized him and arranged for an airlift to Durban's Inkasi Albert Luthuli Central Hospital. Imaging showed deep lacerations to the calf and partial tearing of the gastrocnemius muscle. Surgeons spent over 2 hours irrigating the wounds, removing embedded tooth fragments, and repairing damaged tissue. Marine authorities investigated and found no provocation or feeding activity in the area. The strike was likely a case of mistaken identity in low visibility. Operators were reminded to keep divers grouped closely, avoid reflective gear in murky water, and ensure safety divers maintained close range during descents. Michael left the hospital on crutches, facing months of rehabilitation. His survival was credited to the crew's rapid extraction and immediate bleeding control. The scars on his leg would remain, a permanent reminder that even in controlled dives with experienced teams, the ocean's predators could still close the distance in seconds. These 5 incidents highlight the ocean's unpredictability and the strength of its apex predators. Though rare, each case offers lessons in shark behavior and the need for strict safety protocols. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love the one waiting for you on the end screen. Go check it out, and I'll see you there.